Choice FM is live at 5.
But it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
Reuben Blackwell and Express Yourself on Choice FM.
Well, good evening, everybody. This is Reuben Blackwell, your Wednesday talk show host for Express Yourself on the greatest station around, Choice FM, the people's choice. And I am so excited to be here with you, recognizing that this is a day we're sort of in Eastern North Carolina, really all up and down the Eastern Seaboard, but particularly in Eastern North Carolina, we're in lockdown mode, preparation mode, prayer mode, trying to ensure that we're going to be okay with this storm coming through. And so I just want to spend the first few minutes of our time together just really encouraging everyone to panic, but prepare and plan. This is, to me, I think it's very similar, and it might be to you if you lived in the eastern part of the state in 1999 when Hurricane Floyd came through. You know, we had several weeks of heavy rains, and then Floyd came through not as a high category storm, but as a slow moving storm with a lot of water and some wind. And so this tropical storm or Hurricane Debbie, whatever she is, whether it is a hurricane or tropical storm, she's making her way slowly up the coast. And I heard that she made landfall in Charleston, which is not that far away from Rocky Mount. So we are expecting the heavy rains to begin either later tonight or tomorrow, and that's when we just need to keep our eyes, if you leave open, if you live close to a tributary or a river or in low land, you know, near a ditch, you know, a culvert, just please keep your eyes open. I'm not asking you to live in fear, just live in preparation and get ready. You know, I'm praying that the storm passes, moves more quickly than what they're thinking, and that it passes and passes without damage to property and especially damage to life or loss of life. So make sure you have water, make sure you have supplies that can withstand a couple of days if that happens of no power. Ensure that you got gas in your car, something I got to do when I finish this session with you guys. I got to put some gas in my car. Make sure you have gas in the car and candles or lanterns or whatever you use in the event that power goes out and it's nighttime. Charge up your cell phones and any of your other devices that you might have to use. And go ahead and get a good book out in case your TV doesn't work the way you want it to work. If you have satellite or if you have cable even, you know, that can be disrupted with a lot of wind or a lot of rain or a lot of overcast cloudiness. So please just prepare yourselves. Check on your neighbors, people that you love. Make sure that your network is secure. You know, those things are very, very important, especially if you have loved ones who are elderly, seniors, you know, challenged in some type of way. Please touch base with your neighbors and make sure that they have what they need, because we get through these things together as humanity. We get through things together. Of course, trusting in God, that's who I am, but you got to work it out your way. I pray, I believe, and I try to work together with people who have a mind to work together. Okay, so today we're going to sort of dive into a topic of great interest and discussion around the country, Project 2025. I'm going to go through some of the highlights that I know about and want to give credit to two sources. First of all, to my very powerful executive assistant, Nafi Moore, and her homework. I asked if she would pull together something for me on Project 2025 last week, and lo and behold, she'd already done a treatise on it and started evaluating it herself. She's a brilliant, powerful young lady, and I appreciate her helping get me up to speed on some of the subtleties of what I see of a 900-page document, as well as I attended a training last night with the NAACP, and they had a wonderful outline and help me understand even more what this is about. So let's just sort of dive right in. What is Project 2025? Well, first of all, it's a document that was created. Really, its roots go all the way back to 1980 when Ronald Reagan was president, when there was a move to um, really roll back the progress that had been made socially, the social projects progress that had been made after the advent of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and affirmative action to help level the playing field and help specifically and particularly Black Americans who were the descendants of um, slavery here in America, was meant to help move us in a trajectory that would make up for 400 years of lost time in social progress, because our ancestors were their time, their bodies, their wealth, their land was ripped, taken, stolen. This is real. And it didn't just happen for a brief moment in time. It happened consistently over centuries. I want you to hear that, over centuries. And so there was recognition in this country and really around the world that there was a need and a baseline need for establishing human rights. In 1948, even after the end of World War II, the United Nations was created in order to hopefully build a network around the world of people who had a baseline and an agreement that every human being had basic rights to live, and that there were some things that, as our Constitution states, were inalienable rights, which means that those are rights that are conferred really by the Creator of heaven and earth. And so some of that is rooted in theistic, religion, but also just a recognition that all people truly are created with basically, we're all the same. We have different hues, tones, shapes. We come from different places, but we all have the basic same anatomy. We have all of the DNA within us is almost exact, very, very small, minute changes but our physiology, our anatomy, our spiritual makeup is the same. And so there was a recognition in 1948 that everybody in the world deserved these things. So at the same time, you also recognize in America what was happening in 1948, right? You know that Black men and Black women served in both world wars, and they were drafted probably at higher rates than white Americans were drafted. And they fought for the freedom and the liberty of the world, but then they came back to America and they became second-class citizens again. When they left, they were second class. They were treated like humans when they were in other parts of the world, in Europe and in the Pacific realm, and then in North Africa, where the World War was waging. But when they came home, they had to go back to being second-class citizens. So even though the United Nations passed this edict or this document that outlined what the basic tenets of human rights were, America still had a long way to catch up, and it took from 1948 till 1964, 1969, when the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Acts were passed, for us to even begin to move forward. So we need to understand that our progress, as a people has been hard fought and long fought. In fact, hey, let's just take it back further. The 13th Amendment, right after slavery, right after the Civil War, which was in 1865, it ended in 1865. The Civil War, the U.S. Constitution was amended. The 13th Amendment ended slavery. The 14th Amendment provided equal protection, right to vote, and an insurrectionist clause there. The 15th Amendment prohibited discrimination against formerly enslaved individuals who were predominantly Black people. Now, thus, because it was in the Constitution doesn't mean it was real. It was not and think these things were adopted in the 1800s. So you know the journey that I just talked to you about. I said we started in the 1600s, at 1600 slavery, 1700 slavery, until the early 1800s, you could still import slaves or Black people. They weren't slaves, they were enslaved peoples. They were people who were free, who had societies of their own, cultures that were thriving of their own. They were writing, they were building, they were scientists, they were mathematicians, they were poets, they were writers, they were business people, commerce people. They were governing people. They had rich, powerful dynasties and legacies throughout all of Africa. And in fact, they were an integral part of Africans were an integral part of civilizing Europe. That story is not told. We're going to bring some folks on here at some point and talk about how Africa civilized Europe twice. So this whole narrative about Black people being inferior, Black people needing someone to lead them, Black people needing to be rescued. All these things were fictitious, and they were created imaginations to help convince the people themselves that they were inferior and that they were less than, and they needed a helping hand just to be on a par with everybody else. When in fact, the matter was that our wealth, our riches, our intellect, our scientific achievements, all those things were stolen, were renamed, were given credit to other people, and us not receiving that ourselves. So why is this important? Because we need to recognize that since the 1600s, we've been undervalued and debased. We have never been given the full credit for who we are, and there have been moves around the world, literally, because remember, Europe, America did not start slavery. Please recognize that. Slavery began in Europe. The concept of it that we know began in Europe, Portugal, and Spain, and Great Britain, and France, and Belgium. All these countries, Germany, all these countries, were participating in going to Africa and getting a workforce so that they could colonize Africa and colonize new discoveries that Europeans had made. Not that there were not people or nations where they found America. America was not discovered, it was invaded. You understand? Just like Africa was not discovered, it was invaded. Asia was not discovered, it was invaded. Central South America was not discovered. Mexico, it was invaded. And it was invaded by colonizers, and that just means monarchies and people in European nations, because they had stripped all their wealth. So they went to other places to take other people's wealth so they could become rich superpowers off of the lives and the wealth of the nations that they invaded, and had superior weaponry technology and had cunning and evil intent. Every place where people welcomed Europeans and then later on Americans into their nations, into their countries, they were welcomed, and then every place that they were welcomed became territorial conquests. So, that's another conversation. But at any rate, this whole Project 2025 has been created, and it was created, the original, the Heritage Foundation is the institution that pulled together the minds and the thinkers, who several of them really sort of refreshed their vision from Ronald Reagan and during the Donald Trump first administration, several of his cabinet secretaries participated in the drafting of this document. And so this document was meant to turn back the hands of time in our nation to a time when pretty much only white men that were wealthy had the right to make decisions and the right to control the lives of everyone else. Now, thankfully today, everybody, and I have to say this frequently and constantly so that, people don't confuse what I'm saying. Everyone white is not a racist, but everyone white benefits from institutions that racism has created because privilege is extended. Economic privilege, social privilege, healthcare privilege, business and economic development privilege, all those privileges are ascribed to individuals while they might not be racist themselves. They are ascribed the opportunity to participate in and benefit from these institutions, creating wealth, the ability to pass down wealth from generation to generation, the ability to have physicians and doctors and providers of your choice, the ability to have jobs and own companies. All these things were created and occurred because there were people who designed these systems to take care of their people. And I understand some measure of that, but if we ascribe to the idea that all people are created equal, as we say we do, those people who say, I'm a constitutionalist. Well, if you believe in the Constitution of the United States, then you should believe that all people, it says all men, but it should be all people are created equal, right? So, any rate, let's just talk about what some of the things that happens in the Project 2025. And so bear with me, I'm going to my notes. But you need to understand that racial progress moves forward through legislation, and legislation are laws, bills that become laws that are enacted by legislative bodies, and that would be for the U.S. Congress, the House of Representatives, and the U.S. Senate. For states, it would be the North Carolina General Assembly or the South Carolina General Assembly, and you have those same bodies. You might have some assembly people, which is equivalent. I think that's how Virginia does. They call assembly people, but they're like the House of Representatives, and then you have senators. And every state has a body like that because that's a branch of government. Another way that racial progress is made and social progress is made is through the courts. And the court system, we have a federal system, and we have a state system, and we have local systems. And this is where the Supreme Court is the top line that's where the buck stops at judicial jurisprudence. And then you go to the states. Every state has a state Supreme Court and a Superior Court, and you've got federal district courts and all types of courts. You got a federal judicial system, a state judicial system, and then of course we know, locally we have our district attorneys and we have our district court judges and superior court judges, and these are all locally elected. Well, they can make law by the rulings on existing laws that they make or they change or they abolish. Like Brown versus Board of Education. That was a move that the Supreme Court made that negated segregation in public places. You had Loving versus Virginia. That was a decision that the Supreme Court made that made interracial marriage legal. That was just in 1967. Y'all, this is 2025. So, you're not talking about even 100 years. If you were born in 1960, this is what, 2025. So you're not talking 60 years yet, So when it was legal for people of different races to marry, we've not had these rights forever and forever and forever. We've not had these rights for hundreds of years. We've only just begun in the last 60 years to move our society forward where there was room for everyone to be valued. And then you have the administrative administration, the administrative branches of government, which is the President of the United States and his or her cabinet secretaries. And then you have governors and his or her cabinet secretaries. And then for every town and in every city, every municipality, you got counties and county commissioners, you have mayors and city councilors, city aldermen. So all of this works together, and this is how progress is made and how it's kept. Well, what the crafters of Project 2025 have created, which they did in response to President Biden's, phenomenal social progress that has been made, social, economic, racial progress. It's just really amazing when I hear people say, oh, the Biden administration hasn't done anything for Black people. The devil is a liar. Yes, he has. He has done many things. That administration has done many things to advance healthcare, to advance economic development. Black business growth and development has exploded under President Biden. The student loan program by itself, the student loan program has forgiven his forgiveness of student loans. I think it's over $100 billion in student loans. Many of those people who benefited from those loans were Black people, Black students, and it's amazing. So there is a dedicated document that's 900 pages long that goes into detail about how to dismantle forever all of the progress that was made in the last 4 years. And they're calling it Project 2025 because what it is, it's a guiding document to dismantle American progress after the November elections, because the new president will be sworn in January 2025. And it's their assumption that it will be Donald Trump. And it's their assumption that when Donald Trump gets there, he'll appoint people in his cabinet, and that hopefully that he'll also have at least one of the houses of Congress, the House of Representatives, which is currently Republican, and which is currently led by Trump Republicans, because there is a difference between moderate conservative Republicans and Trump Republicans and Democrats. But we also have to recognize, and this is where I challenge my Black Republican friends, and I have many of them, but I challenge them, that if you ascribe yourself to be a Republican and you're voting Republican in this upcoming election, then you are a Donald Trump Republican, which means that you are anti-Black. And I don't care how many stars or celebrities or quote unquote smart people think that they have arrived and that you want to criticize what progress has not occurred under Democratic administrations. You cannot compare that with the intentionality that Donald Trump, now he's trying to back away from it, but his vice presidential candidate, J.D. Vance, his vice presidential candidate wrote the preamble to 2025. He was a crafter of the design and the intention of 2025. So I'm just not even understanding. Somebody got to help me understand this whole concept about Blacks for Trump. All I got to say is what's the old saying? All skin folk ain't kinfolk, and you ain't no kin to me. I'm so sorry about that.
Choice FM is live at 5.
But it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
Reuben Blackwell and Express Yourself on Choice FM.
Hey, welcome back. This is Reuben. Thank you so much for staying tuned with me. And if you're just tuning in, we got about 30 more minutes, a good time to talk. We're talking about Project 2025, and I gave for the first half of the show sort of a preamble to tell us how we got to where we are. Well, now that we're here, why don't we just sort of jump into it? Much of Project 2025 relates to gender, sexuality, and race, and it aims to end most all of the federal government's efforts to achieve equity and even collect data that could be used to track outcomes across public and private sectors. And it says the opening essay of the plan, listen to this, written by the Heritage Project President Kevin Roberts, succinctly summarizes the goal of Project 2025. It's a promise, and this is a quote, a promise to make America a conservative nation. To do so, the next presidential administration should focus on 4 broad fronts that will decide America's future. Those four fronts include: number one, restore the family as a centerpiece of American life and protect our children. That means their definition of family is a man and a woman and children and married. Number two, dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. Not sure what return governance to the American people means when you dismantle the administration. It sounds like to me intentional chaos. Number three, defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. Global threats for them means having institutions like the United Nations, which govern and create accountability for all nations on basic human rights. And number four, secure our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. Now, it's very clear in the rhetoric of the crafters of Project 2025 that there's some people who are given rights by God and there are other people who are not given rights by God. And live freely means freely as I want you to live, where I want you to go, what I want you to do, with whom I want you to do it. And that sounds like it sounds like something I don't want to live in. The rest of the document sketches out in detail how the next conservative administration can execute their goals on these four fronts. That includes comprehensive outlines of what the White House and every single federal agency should do to overhaul its goals and day-to-day operations, from Department of Agriculture to Department of Education, Department of Defense, Small Business Administration, Health and Human Services, every sector of the entire branch of governance. Major civil and human rights concerns. It's a fundamental attack on Black and progressive government workers. And it says, this is a quote, guys, the fundamental principle guiding this project is a plan to embed conservative-minded political appointees throughout the federal government. That means fire anybody who doesn't think like I think. Number two, prioritizing fighting racism against white Americans. So first of all, they don't believe that there is racism that is focused on Black people. They believe that Black people are exercising racism against white people. That's absurd. Both Trump's Agenda 47 and Project 2025 plans vow to get rid of all anti-white indoctrination, which is basically telling the history of what they actually did. Affirmative action, abolishing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and especially the dreaded critical race theory, which nobody, for the most part, can even explain. A plan to stop talking about race and stop collecting data. Why is that important? Well, it would ban many governmental agencies from collecting racial or demographic data. That means no one can be held accountable for why Black women are not treated at the same level for pain as white women. That would do away with anyone being accountable for the fact in North Carolina that if you are born a Black man in Edgecombe County, you have a higher prevalence to die before anybody else in all of North Carolina. That would also say for white women that there's no data collected on you at the rate that you open and start businesses, or anything about your health or your loans that you're getting for business development loans or anything else like that. They want to strip away any ability to track progress or lack of progress from any population group. Everything is just brought into one big data pool, and you don't know anything about what any population is doing. That's because they have no plans to target and support and assist anyone who is not a white male. The plan is to protect law enforcement above enforcing the law equally. You heard what Donald Trump said, that he plans, if he's elected, to give police unbridled immunity, complete immunity from anything they do. Now, I'm on the city council and I support the police. I support funding law enforcement at some level, but I do not support the fact that if you wear a badge, you have more rights as a law enforcement agent than the people that you are supposedly protecting. And history tells you in our own history, the last several weeks, Miss Massey, had a pot of boiling water on the stove, and the cop thought that she was gonna hurt him all the way across the room with a pot of boiling water and shot her dead. Shot her dead. Under the Trump administration, he'd be provided immunity, which means he can shoot you down just for thinking, oh, I'm uncomfortable. You're moving into my space. You're gone. You're a goner. This law would stop the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division from investigating voter suppression as well as election interference. That just means that they want to strip away everything that protects people of color, especially Black people. Student loans. Okay, if you're a young person, if you're not so young person and you needed help going to an institution of higher learning, whether that's a community college or whether that is, a four-year institution, the Trump administration would cut or privatize all federal loan programs. Not only would this end the fetish, they call this a fetish of forgiving student loans, but it would also eliminate income-driven repayment plans. So there is no move, poor people, whether you're a rural poor person or whether you're an urban poor person, under a new Trump administration. And this is their manifesto. And that's why this is not just some document that's just floating out here that, that somebody created. This was crafted by Trump administration officials, by his vice presidential candidate pick, and supported by him when he's in rooms that just look like him and people who look like him who support what he does. This is created to turn back the hands of time. So when you hear Vice President Kamala Harris stating we're not going back, this is what she's referring to. That she has no intention, and I have no intention, and I hope everybody listening to me has no intention of turning the hands of time back. If anything, we need to do more to make America better for everyone that lives here and for everyone who's trying to come here. Black-owned businesses, Project 2025 would dismantle nearly every federal program dedicated to building and strengthening Black-owned businesses. It would eliminate a 60-year-old program that requires federal contractors to comply with anti-discrimination laws and overhaul the Minority Business Development Agency into a program focused on the benefit of free markets, the evils of socialism and communism, and the destructive effect of taxes and regulations on minority business. They want to end that because they don't plan to have any minority businesses. And if they do have minority businesses, they'll own them and control them themselves and call themselves a minority. Threats to our economy. Department of Housing and Urban Renewal. They want to eliminate new housing fund supply. Who should be involved? When somebody asks me, well, why do I need to vote? My vote doesn't matter. Okay, where do you live? I hear that most. I'm going to tell you, I hear more talking about why does my vote matter. I'm not going to vote from poor people who live in poor neighborhoods and who live in public housing. I hear that more from public housing folks than anybody else. Why do I need to vote? Well, you about to not have anywhere to live. You understand that? It's not about to not be any public housing, because you know what? They want you back in the fields, and that's where you're going to head to. Eliminate new housing fund supply, reverse equitable progress for appraisals and valuations. That means if you're trying to use sophisticated Black folk who think you're above anybody and everybody, I'm talking to some of my friends, who live in big homes and you have great income flowing through. But guess what? Jay-Z had a song that said, you still what? I'm not going to say that word. But, when appraisers come into your home, and if you got African art on the wall and the picture of your mama who looks as brown as you do, then your home might not be, you might live in a beautiful $1 million home, but, it's been documented that Black people homes are not rated as high and in value as white people's homes. It's been documented. They want to roll all that stuff back. Department of Labor and related agencies, reverse DEI, They call it revolution in the labor policy. Eliminate racial classifications in all trainings related to race, and then create pro-life insurance requirements and completely revise EEOC. That means protections for people who work. And the more average your job is, the less protection you'll have. The higher you go in whatever degrees, if you're able to get them, under this new policy, it won't matter because no one will be able to protect you when people tell you, well, you might have a PhD, but it's just not in the area that we need it in. And guess what? Your PhD from that little HBCU isn't as important as my PhD from a predominantly white institution. Small Business Administration, end all SBA direct lending, revise disaster loan programs. We're sitting here on the eve of another major tropical storm, which, I pray it does not do great damage, but it has the potential to do great damage. And everywhere it has gone, it has created great damage. And all of these anti-science Donald Trumpers do not believe in climate change, but they're the ones who have exposed the whole world to all these extreme storms that last a long time, and the seasons are extending longer and longer and longer. Pretty soon, Rocky Mount's going to be the coast. You'll come to Rocky Mount to go to the beach, and it's crazy. Financial regulatory agencies, they want to get rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, repeal Dodd-Frank, redefine deceptive, unfair, and abusive practices. Folks, that's every area of our life and living. They want to go back to a time when individual bankers can tell you, well, you get a loan and you don't get a loan, and it doesn't matter about whether you paid your bills. It doesn't matter about how much money you make. It doesn't matter about anything other than what that person thinks of you and wants to do for you or not. There is no level of accountability. Eliminate the Department of Education. Do you hear what I say? Eliminate the Department of Education. Project 2025 calls for federal education policy to be limited, including the elimination of the Department of Education. This would result in transferring control of education policies to the state, so every state gets to decide how they want to educate their people. Remove civil rights protections, and that includes if you are a parent or a sibling or someone who loves people who are cognitively impaired or have different ways of seeing and dealing. If you have a physical challenge, then those are called civil rights. There are laws to protect people who are more vulnerable to abuse, who are more vulnerable to being pushed aside and not paid attention to. All of those things go away. Redirect funding away from public schools. This is a manifesto, folks. Project 2025 calls for the administration to take immediate steps to shift critical funding away from public schools in promotion of private and charter schools and faith-based institutions. We see that in North Carolina already. We see it in Rocky Mount, where we have dismantled public education as we have known it in a collaborative regional manner, and we've gone back to we've never had just a two-county system, a county system in Rocky Mount, Edgecombe, and Nash counties. And so this says that it's better not to have public schools. Well, may I remind you who created the concept of public schools? Maybe you didn't know that, but it was formerly enslaved people who worked together with white people who were former slave owners, and they together in North Carolina, in other states in the South, created the concept that everybody deserves the right to be educated. Because before Black people who were enslaved were free, only people who could afford to be educated were rich white people, and they were mostly men. The women were able to get what they could get, but they did not have the same opportunities as white men. And it wasn't all white men. It was rich white men. You understand? They want to return our country back to a time where there's a very small ruling class. They want to abolish the middle class and go back to either being poor or being wealthy. And if you're black and you're standing on an island of wealth, you will not retain it. Trust me. You might think you, Kanye, you might think you in the cut, or whatever them people hanging out with those for Amber Rose. Y'all might think, and that's why you're struggling so hard not to be black, but one drop rule still works in your face. I'm sorry. Institute a Parents' Bill of Rights. Project 2025 seeks to give greater control of education curriculum to parents. This would override curriculum decisions by professional educators. So people who went to school to learn how to teach and educate other people no longer have the ability to determine what are benchmarks of progress in education. You could literally have a high school diploma person or a person with a degree, but a degree in home ec, telling you what you can teach in science. That makes no sense. You're crazy. I'm sorry. You cannot defend this. You cannot defend this for people of color, for people of goodwill, for people who want to see a competitive America. And the other thing I want to say to you, we're not living in 18 anything. You understand that? We're not living in 19 anything. We can turn the hands of this country back if you want to. But if you think China and India and European nations are not going to invest in technology, are not going to build up their country, just because we're America does not mean we'll be at the top of the heap always. And if you see, like I see, if you're watching the Olympics, who is bringing home the gold? You know, it's everybody. But there is a predominance of people of color who are celebrating each other and working together with all ethnic groups across America and across the world, who are promoting that we are connected and one with humanity, and we all deserve a chance. They want to reduce all emphasis in DEI in education and student loan forgiveness programs. They want to abolish that completely and say, you pay your debt. We don't care if it takes you the rest of your life. You know, you owe it, you pay it. And they don't think about, nor do they care about, how your education and your investment helps move America forward. Well, we care. We care. And all I can say to you is you better get educated. Shrinking the social safety network. It cuts federal funding to states for Medicaid. North Carolina just got Medicaid expansion. We just got it. We just got an additional 600,000 people who didn't have insurance now are eligible and have signed up for insurance. Project 2025 says we're getting ready to rip that away from you. Place time limits and lifetime caps on Medicaid coverage. Oh my goodness. That means that you might have your little Medicaid card today, but you have a limit for how you get to use it. It tells you that your value in your life is less than that of other people because of how much money you make. There's something wrong with that. Allow states to adopt work requirements for Medicaid. So they just want to say again, if you want Medicaid, you got to have a job. Doesn't matter if they're not jobs available for whatever your skill set is. What it does say is that you're going to have to work in order to earn Medicaid. Healthcare is not guaranteed. Repeals the Inflation Reduction Act under Medicare, reduces access to food stamps. So for all my friends who are using food stamps in order to keep your freezer full and feed your children, and you know what the GOP tries to do is try to demonize people who use food stamps as currency, you know, to buy other things and do other things. They're saying that, you know, you don't need all that to live. It's that they're saying you don't have to have, you know, those, you don't need food like everybody else needs food. And then look, rejects universal free school lunch. You got to be awfully mean. These are the same people who don't want to see abortion. but they don't want to feed your children. I'm just saying, we got to do better. And I know it's time for me to wrap up, and I appreciate you listening. And I know it's a lot to digest, but we need to understand the times we're living in. And I don't care if you're Black, you're white, you're Latino, you're Asian, you're African. This type of legislation, this type of effort, this type of initiative rips out the heart and the soul of who we are as a country. We lose our competitiveness and we throw our future down the drain. Also, a few people can dominate. Elon Musk can dominate and do whatever they want to do. And they win and they're wealthy, no matter who has to pay a price or cost for their comfort. Well, I'm just going to say to you, I don't ascribe to it. I don't buy it. And that's why I'm going to come back to you next week, and we're going to do more good talk about Project 2025. And I want you to do some research yourself. Look it up yourself. If you don't trust what I say, go look it up yourself. Read it for yourself. 900 pages. Thank you so much for listening to me. I know I've been on a, and I'm not going to call it a rant, but I'm going to call it a good, strong educational session today on why you need to get yourself registered to vote. If you are already registered to vote, make your mind up. As soon as the polls open, go cast your vote, and make sure you vote for people who care about you and care about your future, who value your children, your mother, your daughter, your sister, and your own human life. God bless you. This is Reuben. Thank you for listening to me on Wednesday. Express yourself. I'm so happy to talk to you, happy to share this information with you. Bad information, but you better hear it, digest it, and let it motivate you to do something great. God bless you. Have a great week. And I'll talk to you soon. Stay safe. Listen to the radio, Choice FM 92.1, and be wise and be safe. God bless you.
Choice FM is live at 5.
But it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
Reuben Blackwell and Express Yourself on Choice FM.